And it asks you, using the chart on page 616, right? Chart on 616, and that chart, illustration 5.7, is discussed starting on 6.14 all the way through 6.17. Okay, but the chart is trying to give you a little simpler, more efficient way of looking at those pieces. So E15-5 is another classification problem, right? It's saying which of the following sets of circumstances require a government to treat another entity as a component unit of its reporting entity, and why? So of these four situations, in which ones are you to treat these entities, right, these other entities, as component units? Well, the quick answer is in all four. Okay? In all four, you're treating them all as component units. The reasons are different. So number 1 says, the government appoints 3 of the 7 members of the governing board of the other entity and guarantees substantial portions of its debt and must approve its tax rate. So if you go to 616 and you look at the chart on 616, okay, it outlines the financial accountability criteria. Any entity that meets this criteria for said government, right, has to be reported as a component unit. Okay? Does that make sense so far? So these are thresholds, and if the entity meets that for the government, they have to be reported as a component unit. So number 1, it says the government appoints 3 of the 7 members of the governing body. Does that meet the threshold that we're given on 616? And how do you know? Where does it talk about governing bodies? Appointment authority. What does it say in appointment authority? Under number 2.
There are points avoiding majority of the other entities, governing body.
Okay. Then it meets that criteria. In this case, does it appoint the majority of members? No. So it doesn't meet that one, right? So far, not a component unit. Okay? What else does it say in the problem? It says it guarantees a substantial portion of its debt and it must approve its tax rate. Okay? So, do you find anything in that chart on 616 about tax rate?
No,
fiscal dependence. It says, an entity is fiscally dependent on a PG, or primary government, if it requires the primary government's substantive approval in order to do one or more of the following: establish its budget, levy taxes, or set other rates or changes. Okay? So there's one piece. You're required, right, to set rates. Or the government is allowed to set or approve its tax rate. Okay? So we have one piece of it. We also know that the primary government, in this case, guarantees a substantial portion of the debt. Okay? That fits number 2 on page 616. So, if you look up kind of at the top of that illustration where it has those boxes, it says 1 plus 3, or 1 plus 2, or 4 plus 2. Right? Those are thresholds. In this case, in that third box, this entity meets that third box. Both fiscal dependence, right, based on the ability to have authority over the unit's tax rate, the entity's tax rate, okay, and the fact that they guarantee a portion of the debt of that entity, they are a component unit of the primary government. Does that make sense what we just did, what we just stepped through? Okay?
So in our answer, do you want us to
Just pull this out
tell
of the
why it's financial
I want you to
or
tell
fiscal dependence?
Yes.
Because
I want you to tell me why I want you to tell me if it's a component unit, which all of them are, and then I want you to tell me why it's a component.
So just pull the stuff
well,
out
I
of the book.
understand that, but if I tell you it's because it has fiscal dependence, is that enough, or do you need to know why it has fiscal dependence?
No, that's fine. If you just say it has fiscal dependence and financial benefit or burden, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. All right. But I wanted to outline that for you so you know why. Okay? Does that make sense how we got there? Kind of, maybe? Okay, number 2. The government appoints 5 of the 7 members of the governing body, which signals what?
1.
Appointment authority, right? Because they appoint a majority. It says it guarantees a limited portion of its debt and does not have substantial approval authority over its budget, its tax rate, or its debt issuances. Okay?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I had a question in that one, because I came up with not, because I guess I just misunderstood on 616. It said the primary government is obligated in some manner for the debt of the organization.
Mhm.
I thought it meant the entire debt, or at least
Okay.
over 50%, and it just said some.
It just said some debt.
So I was
Yeah.
kind of confused.
And if you wrote that, if you wrote this is why I decided that, I would accept that. Because the reasoning is there, and that's what I'm after. Okay? So if you reason that out and you put this is why, right? This is why it's not, that's fine. Okay? But if it's responsible for any level of its debt, right, it's a component unit. Because that primary government has, if somebody's responsible for some of your debt, even if it's only some of your debt, right, you're still beholden to them and they're beholden to you. Okay? And that appointment authority, I think, carries a lot of weight as well. Right? You do need 2, but the appointment authority carries a lot of weight. Okay?
Okay, yeah, because I saw on number 3 it said excess of 50% of it.
Yeah.
And so I guess I was relating that to
Yeah,
the debt. It
sure.
had to be more than that.
Sure.
So, okay.
Sure. That's reasonable, Jeff. That's
Okay.
reasonable. Okay? So number 3, the government appoints 4 of the 7 members of the governing body. Right? So it appoints a voting majority. Okay? And it says it has no direct authority over its operations. It does annually provide in excess of 50% of its financing in non-exchange transactions. So it does have, it does provide a significant financial resource. Okay, so it does have, what is it, financial burden?
1 and 2.
Or financial or fiscal dependence, however you want to look at it. Okay. Because they're providing a lot of those pieces. These thresholds do come into play. Okay? They do come into play for entities. Especially if it's a nonprofit, right? That's getting a lot of its funding from the government. In chapter 16, you're also introduced to the Form 990. Probably, unless you've worked with nonprofits, you haven't filled out a Form 990. But a Form 990 is the IRS form that nonprofits have to fill out. They have to report. And they have to report whether they're dependent or not on another agency. It could be a government, it could be another nonprofit, right? You could have one nonprofit that's dependent on another nonprofit. But you have to report that, you have to disclose that. And that's part of the fallout of Sarbanes-Oxley. Okay. All right, number 3, we talked about. Number 4. The government created the organization to perform key functions that it believed could be performed more effectively by a separate organization. The government does not appoint any board members, but does have substantive approval authority over the hiring of key management personnel. If desired in the future, the government can take over the entity's operations and eliminate the other entity.
There's your answer right there.
Right. That is correct. Okay? The fact that it has the authority to be able to dissolve this other entity, right, should signal you that, yes, they're dependent and they're a component unit. Okay? Do those make sense? Okay? So that chart on 616 is what you use for exercise 15.5.